Good afternoon. I also think I'm the one standing between you and lunch. Sorry. So maybe if I, be quickly, you can get lunch at first. That would be good. You get first choice and so on. This is a sponsored session, but one of the nice things about E2EVC is that Alex always tells us no sponsoring material. This is the only way I get away with marketing, not mentioning the company I work for. If you guys want to know which company I work for, I haven't said it on the camera. With that being said, what I also like about this conference is that instead of talking about, typical, what is backup, how do you back up, what are features, you can talk about something else, you can talk about things you can live by. And what I wanted to do this year, last year I talked at Brussels and I talked about modernizing the way you do your data protection. And this year I wanted to talk about the 3-2-1 rule. It's not invented by us, but I wanted to talk about it because it's a rule where every backup administrator should live by. Now if you guys are not a backup administrator, then go back to your data centers and ask the backup administrators if they know this rule. If not, kick. If you don't live by it, again, kick. This is extremely important, and it's not about one single backup product. It's about using different layers. So, on the agenda, if this thing wants to work, here we go. I'm going to talk about why this is so important, because the IT landscape is changing. So why do you want to work with this rule? We're going to, of course, say what it is. That might be interesting if I want to talk about it. And then I'm going to talk about the different layers and the different possibilities you have. Because there's not a single solution for the 3-2-1 rule. It's not this is it. You have multiple options. And probably in everybody's environment, you have all the layers already there that you can use, but you just don't use them for some reason. And unfortunately, I see that a lot in many data centers that I ask customers, you have it, why don't you use it? Because we didn't know. And then finally, in the end, if there's time, we got strict here at E2EVC, and I actually want to get you out for the sandwiches in time. There's still Q&A. On the other hand, I'll be running around here somewhere, so there's always time to ask me questions afterwards. That being said, let's have a quick look at the why. Very simple. Why are we talking about this? What is so changing in IT infrastructures today? Now, if we're going to look at what's happening, and some companies are way ahead than other companies, but we're all moving to it, it's we all want to build modern data centers. What do we mean by modern data centers? They're data centers that are built to provision IT services faster. Unfortunately, there's still the request to strengthen security and control on it. But the last part is probably the biggest difficulty in these modern data centers. We have to do this with less money. There has been a crisis. We get less money, sometimes even less IT people, and we have to do all of this. Why? I think we all know why. It's because our end users ask for it, right? 10 years ago, I was one of these lucky IT. Actually, I started more than 15 years ago, but don't ask my age. And we lived in the ivory tower. We decided what IT was. We made security. And end users, they could get what we gave them. It was a great time. Today it doesn't happen anymore. End users come into a company and they say, hey, I want this 24/7. I want to be able to read my email when I'm on the Bahamas on a holiday. And I want to read it on a smartphone. I want to read it on my tablet. I want to read it on I don't care, whatever I can get my hands on. That was a couple of years when that started. Start with email. Today, people want to access all of their information 24/7. Again, as I said 10 years ago, I was one of the backup administrators, and we had from 6 in the evening until 6 in the morning backup window. It just doesn't exist anymore. 24/7 we need to do. Patching, no. We need to be online. Now there are many techniques, and that's what a modern data center are, but we have to work on it. Now how do we build those modern data centers? And this is exactly what I hear yesterday, what I'm hearing today. We built this on virtualization technologies. We built this on modern storage, and there's a lot of options today in the storage. And we built this now as well on cloud solutions, where it's going to be a private cloud, where it's going to be a hybrid cloud, where it's going to be a public cloud. I think we're going to see that change the next couple of years. For today, we see different directions. But this is the technologies that we build it on. But no matter what we do, we want to enable that always-on business, 24/7, being able to be reached whenever you want. If you work today in help desk, and I know a few guys that still work there, they are getting used to the fact they're called on a Sunday morning at 6 o'clock because email is down. I couldn't have imagined that when I worked in help desk. It was, yeah, I'll fix it on a Monday, man. Come on, it's weekends. Stop working. Today it's like this. So we need to build that business. And one of the ways we can do that is by following the 3-2-1 rule. Why? Always-on technologies like clustering, geo-clustering, all of these techniques to keeping your services online are most of the time extremely expensive. And that's okay. You use it for your critical applications. The issue with those critical applications today is everything has become a critical application for one reason. I mean, you can't run Exchange anymore without having AD, without having DHCP, without having DNS. Oh, and by the way, you have to have a gateway to it. So it's going to start costing a lot of money. So you have to think, how can I make sure that I'm still 24/7, but with less costs? Again, this is where the 3-2-1 rule comes in and can help you. All right. Let's have a look at what it is. Now the funny part, if we look at the history, it is not invented by an IT guy. It's invented by a photographer. His name is Peter Kroch. You've got his link on there. I'm sure the slides will be shared. He's got some nice pictures if you're into photography, really nice. But one of his statements was there are two kinds of people in this world. One that had a disk failure and the other ones that will have a disk failure sooner or later. It will happen. So because he worked so much with photographs and he was one of the first really working heavily on digital pictures, he designed the 3-2-1 rule for his house. Now this is typical end user, right? You back up to the folder, you've got 3 copies of your pictures, one somewhere on the computer, one to another disk, and maybe somewhere keeping one in the safe. And with lately Dropbox, OneDrive, Google Drive, those kind of things, keep one in the cloud as well. This is of course something we don't want in our enterprises. I mean, imagine we do our backups on some computer, then on a disk that we take home every day, or put it on Dropbox, probably not the ideal situation. But this is basically the 3-2-1 rule that we can use in our environments. 3 copies of our data, at least 2 different media, and 1 different location. That's simple, okay? Now, the company I work for, we like to make it a 3-2-1 rule with a 0 as well. Because one of the things what we like is you need to be able to test your backups. I hate to ask this, but I'm going to do it. How many of you test your backups once a year? Yeah, at least once a year. All right, keep up your hands, keep up your hands. Even that is only half. Every 6 months. I'm impressed, but yeah, I am at E2VC, true. 3 months. How about weekly? No? How about daily? Yeah. One of the things you can learn with the 3-2-1 rule, if you use the right tool sets, you need to test one backup, the first one you take. If you test that, everything else can be a bit level copy, and you know that all of the other copies are also good to start. And the nice thing about when you follow this rule and you use all the layers you have, again, not only the backup solution, but different layers, you can do this daily, automate it, and the only thing as an IT administrator you have to do is come in the morning, grab a cup of coffee, read the email, and see if it's successful every day. Now that's cool, right? That is what you want. Now, 3, I already said it, right? So let's just continue and go a little bit further. 3 copies, at least 3 copies of your data. First mistake many people make is it's not 3 separate copies after production data. One of the 3 copies is actually your production data. It's a copy, it's running, but it's a copy you have. And then most of the time you will do a primary backup. Now I say primary backup, but this could be different types of backup. This could be a storage snapshot as well. This could be a simple robocopy, although I would not advise it, but it is possible. So call it backup, call it whatever you want, but you're gonna get a copy of that production data. and then you just make sure you have a copy somewhere else. Now again, very important, the first one is a backup. So that means you probably disturb your production environment. You need the resources. The second copy, or the third copy in this case, make sure it comes from this one. And as long as this one is tested, you're good for that another one, and you don't need to use those additional resources on your production environment, right? The next thing you have to think about, two different media. And don't worry, we're going to go a little bit deeper on this as well. Again, we start from here. We got a VMware environment, we got a Hyper-V environment, we may have some physical servers left, we got some storage. I'm not going to go too deep into storage. I know there are many storage experts in here, whatever storage you're using for your production environment. The problem is your production storage isn't fail-proof. I know many storage vendors and storage fans are going to say, just take storage snapshots, it's easy, it's safe, and then the SAN goes down. So make sure that at least one of those copies or those backups is somewhere else. And you use another JBOD, another SAN, depending on how much money you have. You can maybe listen to Karsten, who talked about storage spaces. Whatever you want to do, your choice. You can use cloud technologies if you want to. That's fine. We might be in the beginning of it. I'll talk more about that as well. But it is possible. It is out there already. And then we got tape. Is tape dead? Well, no. Will it change? Will tape change the way it's being used in the future? Oh yeah. Tape is going to be really a long-term archive, but it's still there and it still lives. And then we're going to talk about getting that one copy off-site. Because even if you work with different systems, if your entire data center goes into flames, you might still be in a problem. Now, when I started in IT, I actually worked for a company that had a few customers, actually quite a few customers, in the WTC towers. The thing was, you had data center A in the one tower, you had data center B in the other tower. You cannot imagine how many businesses went out of businesses because of that disaster that happened. In fact, the company I worked for went out of business because we couldn't recover anymore and we lost a lot of companies. After that there came new rules, you have to be 11 miles out of it. Today it depends on the country. I even heard a country where it has to be 100 miles away, your copy. 100 miles is quite a lot. But that is something that you need to think about as well. Now what kind of options have you there? And again, we're going to go deeper in it in a couple of minutes. You can have a secondary data center, whether it's colocation, whether it's your own data center. You can go to that cloud, or you still can use that tape possibility. Still there. All right. Now let's go a little bit deeper, right? And I kind of told most of it, but let's look at those three copies again. Only thing I want to stress out here, because this is actually the most easiest part to do. One copy of the production environment and don't touch the production environment anymore, whatever you do. Don't put 2 times resources overhead on your production environment. And there's another reason as well. The moment you're working with solutions that have transactional log, if you have 2 different systems taking a backup and you got transactional logs, you might break something. You don't see it at first because you might be doing only VM level backups, and then you need to restore, and suddenly SQL or Exchange says, hey, I'm missing like quite a few logs, where are they? And you're like, yeah, no idea. And that can be dangerous, especially if you use only storage snapshots. They won't know what happened, and you suddenly break a chain. So once you do it on the production, and then you start making copies of that backup copy. And again, many techniques exist to do it. Different media, I already talked about it. Primary storage, one of the things you can do, and I see a lot of people doing that as well, is the first backup storage is the same as the primary storage. Now you have to think about it. What's the advantage of that is very fast recovery, because your primary storage will be rather expensive, will be rather fast, works great. Downside is dollars. Especially, I was 2 days ago at an event in London, and there was a certain storage vendor, which name I'm not going to say. Well, he was claiming that, forget about all the storage we know today. Soon enough, we'll be using all flash, even for our backup target. I'm thinking this is going to be an expensive backup target. Yeah, but prices are dropping, but it's still expensive. You can do it. You get the advantage of fast restores, fast backups, fast merges, that kind of stuff, but it can be expensive in the end. Now, when we're going to talk about layers, you will see that do you really need to keep 30 days of backups on that primary storage? Again, a mistake we see a lot in data centers. My first backup has to be 30 days long. Why? Is it really necessary to recover within 1 minute from 30 days ago? If a guy comes in and says, I've deleted an email 30 days ago, I need to recover, does he really care that 1 minute?
Depends on the guy.
If it's the CEO, if it's the CEO, you probably won't, but no. And then you're going to go to that secondary storage. Now, another mistake we see a lot is the secondary storage. Again, you can use cloud, you can tape it. But most of the secondary storage, they also want disks. They want a little bit longer than on the primary storage, and it's a good idea. It's a good way of doing your backups. But then they think they still need to buy very expensive storage for that secondary target. In fact, in most cases, if you think very carefully about your strategy, about this rule, you probably can live with just a bunch of disks. The performance doesn't have to be that, because the only thing you're going to do at that moment is you take the copy of there and you just send it over. And even if it needs to do a merge or it needs to do some work, it's somewhere in the back. It's on a storage that it only does that. So who cares? And that can save you a lot of money. I always love going into customers say, hey, we would like to use your product. What we did is we bought a SAN for primary storage, we bought another SAN for the secondary, and we bought a third one to put offsite. I'm like, you just threw away all of your money for no good reason. Are you going to use that SAN for something else? No, only backup. I mean, okay, I'm going to charge you additionally for our product because you have way too much money spent. But it happens. And then we got the offsite possibilities. Tape. Let's start with tape, right? Still best price per gigabyte, whether we like it or not. Forget about the marketing that you hear. Cloud is much cheaper. Yeah, try storing some data for 1 year in the cloud. You will see the money coming in. It doesn't consume power to be stored. That's probably the beauty. That means no additional money coming over. But it has some downsides. The manual activities to send it offsite, you give it to a driver that comes with a truck, loses your tape somewhere. So there are some risks associated with this, right? And if you want to restore it and you've got an RTO and it'll tell you have to be able to restore it within 4 hours, then yeah, probably by the time you got the tapes back, it's 4 days longer. So that means again, 3-2-1 rule. If you get this request and the RTO is 4 hours, tape going to be the last one. Talking about this while I'm here, I'm completely screwing up my slides, but it doesn't matter. If you do this 3-2-1 rule, then you have to immediately talk to whoever is in response, and don't make it IT. Talk to HR, talk to your financial officer, make the decision on your SLAs. Everything you back up on that primary storage or on that backup storage, the first backup, you can give them an RTO, an RPO of 15 minutes or less. Sure, for the first 5 days. Everything you need to restore which is older than those 5 days, or 7, let's take a week, right? Everything which is older and going to a JBOT or offsite or something like that, but still on disk storage, give them an RTO of 4 hours. Everything which is on the archival, which could be the cloud, could be the tape, or really somewhere else, give them a couple of days. And we'll see later on with the statistics that in 99% of the cases, you will never use that old stuff. Come back to it. Now, what other people started to use because they really wanted to get rid of tapes, who still wants to use tapes, is work with remote sites. Now, remote sites has a few advantages, all in the hands of you. You do it yourself. Still a big advantage that you can do everything yourself. It still can be disk-based, whether it's cheap or expensive storage, but unfortunately IT staff, and remember that we don't have money anymore for hiring new ITs, we suddenly have to maintain 2 sites, and you do CapEx expenses for buildings that are rarely used and just sitting there, and so it's got some disadvantages as well. Colocation is used also a lot lately. Same benefits as having your own remote site, more or less, so because some parts aren't you, but you kind of rent the building, and CFOs like that because that means OPEX suddenly on a monthly basis. But on the other hand, you still need the staff and you still have the CapEx for the hardware, which is probably again not used much of it. And then we got the clouds, which is the future. This is what we're going to do. And this is what all of the CFOs love. It's OPEX. No expenses for the building, no expenses for the hardware, or at least that's what they're thinking, right? Pay as you go model. They love that kind of stuff. Complexity, you just connect it, you pay with your credit card and it works, right? How awesome is that? Lately, many of these clouds have a possibility to seed, which means you do your first backup and then send a USB device or whatever you want to send, to avoid that large transfers. But you still have that upload and the download. Uploading most of the time is nice. Downloading your data can be A, very, very slow. B, hey, suddenly you have to pay for downloading your data. That's not so good. And you don't know what happened with your data. That is also what we see now lately with customers is going back, the large cloud providers, what actually happens with my data. Now we can solve this more and more with service providers, the ones that live in your same town where we can have a dinner with and talk face to face, agree on SLAs. At least you can see what happens with your data. But still there are some issues, and I'm going to come back as well when we talk about about the layers. But also think about your RTO. Imagine you have 40 terabytes of backups you need to download because something went down. What's your RTO? 1 hour? I don't think so. 1 day? Even that I don't think so. Unless you really, really got a big pipe directly connected to that service provider. But it's slow. Keep that in mind and tell up front, this is what will happen if something goes wrong. And we see lots of people forgetting it. Yeah, we're storing our backups in the cloud. How fast can you recover? Easily, I go with my laptop, I connect to the website, I start downloading my data. How long is it going to take? I don't know, we never tested it. Well, make sure. All right. We don't need to test, that's not necessary. Never goes something wrong with your data, right? Now let's look further on that 3-2-1 rule and see all the possibilities, all the layers we can implement in that rule. Again, it won't be backup alone. First, one solution fits all. Every vendor will tell you they can do the 3-2-1 rule on their own. But in reality, it's better to mix different layers, different protection techniques together. Because if you got multiple layers, that means you can put the advantages, you can take the advantages of each layer and kind of ignore the disadvantages or get passed by them. And also, why stop at 3-2-1? It's a great rule. For me, it's a minimum. Well, why not make it 5-4-2? Depending on the needs that your company has. And again, watch what are the different approaches that I'm going to present, and you'll see that you probably have many of these layers already there, you just are not using it. So think further than what you have today. Why do I say that? Because bringing this approach to a data center is a combined effort of storage guys, networking guys, application guys, virtualization guys, and backup guys. Smaller shops will be able to do that. Enterprises, those are the guys that's standing with guns to each other. Don't touch my storage, don't touch my network. So it's a difficult exercise, but it can work very well. So sum the benefits of the different tiers, neutralize them, and statistics are your best friends. And this is, what I already talked about. Your first primary backup on that expensive target. How long do you want to keep it? And this is what we know. Over 66% are reopened once of your files, and 95% fewer than 5 times. We know from statistics that when you do backups, 99% of your recoveries are from within a week. Unless it's, of course, the CEO, which somebody said. We know that he only realized that he deleted a mail 30 days later. But It's very, very rarely. So the first one, fast, quick recovery. After that, you have other things you can do. So most of the restores, as I said, right, from the recent restore points. After that, probably just an archive. Focus on the RTO, but the RTO design should only look at that first tier of the data protection strategy. Anything else, and be honest about it, know that your second tier will be slower and just say it. If they really want also an RTO of 15 minutes for the second tier, then agree with them and ask them €1 million to, buy the stuff you want. If they still agree, well, you're a lucky IT administrator. Probably not. And actually, I start always with a tier -1. And this is what most people forget. Do you know that many applications have protection inside? Think about it. Think about think about the first defense in something like SharePoint, Exchange, Active Directory, SQL Server, and any other app that has this kind of protection or that uses one of these things in the background. Why should I recover an email when I can go in Exchange and say, keep deleted items for 15 days in the application? Oh, and give self-service to the end user. Why should I, as a backup administrator, worry about it? After 15 days, sure, let's go to the backup. Oh, by the way, it won't be within 15 minutes now. Now you need to wait an hour. You need to wait 4 hours. It's a good strategy. It exists. Same for SharePoint. SharePoint actually has 2 defense systems. You can use versioning, which means if they screw up a document, you can go back to the previous one, and it's got a trash can. And SQL has some good stuff as well, but I leave that to the SQL DBAs, but I don't understand too much about it. And even today, Active Directory has deleted items, which you can use as well. So you have different things. Downside, of course, this is literally a single point of failure. If the application fails, well, it's gone. It does use some production storage, but let's be honest, that's really limited. It's a downside, but it leverages the application, and it has no impact on the hypervisor if you're using virtualization. That should be your first defense. Everything within 1 week, within 15 days, leave it to the application and leave the backup administrators alone. Sounds like a plan. And of course, faster core, user restore possibilities, as I said. The second tier you should look at are storage snapshots. Storage snapshots, you can have high frequency copies, no real impact on the hypervisor, only a little bit. Still got some downsides as well. Again, single point of failure. If the storage dies, Now I know some storage vendors will say, well, you take a snapshot on one storage, then send it to the other expensive storage. What can happen? Well, if there's data corruption, you're still screwed with this kind of solution. But on the other hand, it's a very cool technique, and you will see lots of data protection vendors that can actually integrate with those storage snapshots and take their backups from that, meaning less load on the hypervisor, whatever the hypervisor is. Normally now I get the question, does Hyper-V have something like this? Well, actually yes, they have hardware VSS, which luckily they will throw away in the next version, but they have it, and it has a possibility. Problem is also consume the production storage. I once had a customer said, I want to have 30 days of snapshots on my SAN, and every hour one snapshot. I'm like, how much storage are you going to buy? And what are you going to use it for? Yeah, but we budgeted it. I'm like, okay, if you budgeted it, fine, but really? So that's also no. And last, application consistency. There are many storage vendors that will tell you, yeah, we can take a good snapshot, a crash consistent snapshot. But they don't know the application which is running inside, which means you don't know what's going to happen with the application. So you can boot up your VM afterwards and probably or maybe the application dies. However, there are techniques like taking a VMware snapshot, taking a hardware snapshot of that VMware snapshot, and immediately consolidate the VMware snapshot again, which means it only takes 30 seconds or something, and then start taking backups from that storage snapshot. It's a very good technique, gives you possibilities to do backups every 15 minutes or less. That's great for your first, or your tier 0, as we call it. Yeah? Other downsides, because it's not all happy joy. One volume, if you take a snapshot, it can contain multiple VMs without you knowing it.
Also unusable data like swap.
Yeah, correct. Unusable data, swap files, those kind of things. So it's not always fantastic. But on the other hand, it leveraged that storage. So that's a good thing. Very low impact on the hypervisor, which we all want. We don't want our backups to take away all the resources of the hypervisor. Our end users will kill us for that. So we can combine that, fast restores, non-deduplicated, and so on. And I don't want to talk about that last one. Tier 1 is small, fast JBots. Again, fast restores. Not as fast as what you have with Tier 0, but still fast, right? Hold a few restore points. As I said, most of the restores come from that first week. It could be some server with Windows, with Linux. I know we have a lot of people that are starting to use now Windows Server 2012 R2 with data duplication on top of it as a backup target. Go figure. But they are using it and they are achieving very good results as well. But you still have a lot of Linux out there that is also used and still probably has some better results depending on which distro you're using. But I've got a colleague here somewhere who's much better in that kind of stuff than I am. Just some CPUs, good amount of RAM, and you're good to go. Local disks, DAS, could be cheap, right? I also know lots of companies that kind of a server after 3 years that's got a lot of disks suddenly becomes a backup target. Reusing it. Why not? Perfectly possible, right? If you have the possibility, mix some SSDs with some HDDs, because when do you need that speed of the SSDs? The moment you do a merge, which we call at that time the hot data. You let it do the merge on the SSD, then it becomes cold, and it can go, automated or not, to the HDD, to save on costs. And then you got Tier 2, large and cheap disk storage. Now what we see sometimes is that Tier 1 and Tier 2 become combined. Okay, it's perfectly possible. First goal, again, extending that retention period, longer than 1 week, 2 weeks, something like that. Still local. Still gives you the decent RPO and the RTOs you want. And actually, if you play it smart, the RPO doesn't matter here because you have that from the Tier 0. So it doesn't matter. But we're talking about RTO, how fast can you go back? Any disk solution that has a low dollar to gigabyte. You want to use software solutions? Fine. You want to use a SAN? Fine as well. Hopefully buy a little bit cheaper one, or maybe one that is out of maintenance and reuse that. You can do that. Or you can use a deduplication appliance as well for that, free. And then we're going to go to that off-site. It becomes a little bit different. As I said, can be added after T2, directly after T1, combination of the two, something you have to do. Tape, we talked about this, but it's the fact that it can move large amount of data. And don't forget to make sure to tell the bosses, if we do tape, because it's cheap and you want cheap, the RTO will become much bigger. Do you agree? Yes, then let's use tape, okay? And then we're going to talk about cloud. Now, to start with, one of the advantages, only 5 minutes? Really? Holy crap. Can you cut that out? One of the things about cloud is it's directly reachable through that internet connection. So less manual activity. But one of the things you have to think about for the future is what are you going to use? Dump storage space? And by dump, I mean you just dump some files on a cloud repository and it's just storage. Then what? How are you going to restore? You need to download everything first and set up a new backup system and then start recovering? Or are you going to use an active component, meaning infrastructure as a service? And I don't want to talk about the fact where it's Azure or Amazon or vCloud or Google Cloud or whatever they're all called, or your service provider, but what if you can add compute to that part? That means suddenly you will get the possibility to start doing recoveries directly from that cloud. Or even use the cloud or your service provider. You can call them and say, hey, my data center just burned down. You have my backups. Maybe you can do it remotely through a portal, or you call them and say, can you please power them all? Give me that gateway so at least my partners, my customers can continue to work. while I rebuild everything. And then of course you're going to pay additionally, but at least you're running again. And you can only do that if you start looking at a cloud solution that has an active component, that has compute. So think about when you start designing that strategy. All right, I need to rush, right? But in the overall design, this is where I like to work for. Actually, tier -1, don't forget the application, but I didn't have more space. Tier 0 storage snapshots, small, fast JBods, large cheap disk storage, off-site cable, and then you can see on the arrows where you're looking at with your RPO and RTO. Now, I have a dream.
Hi, Martin.
I knew this was coming. I should have changed this. Tier -1, tier -1, tier 0, and then, you know, when I talked about tier 1 and tier 2, more or less, combine them, and then we're gonna get soon, it's already happening today, but they're still kind of difficult to work with and extremely expensive. It's a combined solution that will give you hybrid storage. What we'll do is it will take backups to that tier 1, keep the hot ones, which means the shorter ones, and the rest do automatic archival. They exist already, and today they're going to send you to cloud. What I'm hoping is that this one will do automatic archiving to whatever your choice is. You don't want to work on the cloud? Fine, use this, use this. We'll see how far it gets. It's getting popular. They're still not 100% really good working, let me put it like that. But we are working, at least the industry is working to that type of things. And then of course, you know, later on, when the prices are really, really becoming cheap, we probably are going to look at these kind of things. We know there are also already in the industry, people are thinking in the medical world, for example, to build a huge cloud where you can store your data for 100 years, and every university, every hospital that has to do something with medical will be able to store their stuff on there, and it will be stored offline. I always think that would be a data center full of tapes, so one way or another, I don't know what technology they're building, but that might be something we're going to see in the future as well. All right, I made it within the 5 minutes, I think. So, if there are more questions, feel free to ask them. Again, I will be running around here. If not, I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. I hope you enjoy Berlin. I earned a beer, and hopefully see you next time at E2 EVC. Cheers.